Hello. My next topic, having discussed about Finland, I come to Sweden. And I take a different perspective for Sweden. Now, Sweden is different from Finland. Finland share a long border with Russia. Sweden is in between Norway and Finland. Now, what is the usefulness of Sweden joining NATO? Just look into internet and you find that there's discussion about the fact that they could, contribute in terms of the Baltic Sea, blocking off the Russian Navy, as well as the airspace. Now, what I want to emphasize here for Sweden is that it is a very different, in a different context. The fact that Sweden actually reduced a military orientation after Russia, also or the Soviet Union, disintegrated. They scaled down a lot then. Then of course you find that in relation to Sweden, I like to use, as you know, this series is meant to focus on Sun Tzu and relating the teaching of Sun Tzu to current world affair. The phrase I feel that's very relevant to Sweden in this current scenario is the very beginning words of The Art of War. 兵者, anyone who's dealing with art of war, right? It is 国之大事, meaning to say that this is something of vital importance to a nation. This matter of joining alliance, and therefore, wearing the badge of I'm a NATO member now, so I fight in coalition with NATO against Russia, right? It's war, right? It's what Sun Tzu say, 死生之地. That means you're entering into a ground where 死而生, alive or dead, and or 存亡之道, right? And to put it in catastrophic terms, Sweden has survived, yes, until now, right? And then 存亡之道, meaning to say your survival or your non-existence, right, would hinge on this decision, looking from the point of view of Sun Tzu. My premise, as I said earlier in Finland video, is that I want world peace. That is my focus. And what I would say would that a NATO Sweden, and the Swedes, there are some protests now against Sweden joining NATO. I think for a very good reason. A minority have felt that this should be, not happened. And why? Very simply, NATO Sweden will heighten the risk in the use of nukes. Right, whether to use nuclear bombs or not. This has been something that has been very topical. Right, and the key point I like to say is, if Sweden join NATO, then they may simply tilt that balance for Russia to decide whether to use nukes in Europe. Now, so the balancing act is really the key to avoid a nuclear war. And therefore I hope that Sweden should consider that as well. Very importantly, that to see the bigger contact, the larger contact beyond Europe, beyond the northern tip of the northern edge of Europe. And I like also to emphasize, and I have used a poster or a slide. You see on the slide, you find that I posted this Peter the Great, and then the map of Sweden, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And then I also included a painting a painting of the Battle of Port-Harvard, fought in 1709, and that fortress, then it was then a fortress, not yet a city, all right, is in Ukraine. All right, it is in Ukraine, and that is a very important historical fact. Sweden had always been the aggressor in the past against Russia, and then the Battle of Port-Harvard is part of the Great Northern War. Now, what happened was, because of that war, Russia grew to overtake Sweden. Swedish Empire was wiped out at that stage, in Ukraine, at that battle. Now, Sweden has no longer that kind of culture that favors the military. It is so unlike the context of U.S. And U.S., there's pride, to be part of the army and serve the country and right. Different culture. The veteran in U.S. are respected. They are contributed to a country and so, but not in Sweden today. And of course, you'll find that what was a determining factor of Russia winning the Battle of Port-Harvard. And I think the key factor really is in the leadership of Peter, the Tsar of Russia. At that time, during that battle, he was not yet given the epithet of the Great. It was after the battle, having won the battle, and having wiped out the Swedish military in that battle, and the Swedish leader then had to hide and in Turkey. Now, so for winning wars, one of the key things is good leaders, having a good leader. Now, I'm not saying, right, but I'm saying relatively speaking, Russia had got a good leader, Putin leading the country, and then convincing at least the bulk of the nation that what had to be done in Ukraine had to be done as a special military operation. And to win wars, like it or not, it's not just weaponry, right? You throw in all the weaponry. It can be the latest innovation and invention, but then ultimately, for a long battle, right, you need good leaders. Now, China won the war against Japan, largely due to Mao Zedong as a great leader. Singapore, as you know, right? Singapore, we bought some Swedish submarine, second-hand, right? And it was due to the leader of Lee Kuan Yew. And therefore, I think one of the sad thing about Europe, USA, and Japan, from my assessment, are poor leadership. They don't have good leaders, as you once had in Europe, in US, and in Japan. In any case, I just want to have my remarks made because I used to have to run seminars for Scandinavian executives when they come over to Singapore too, and I'll be posting some of this in the Facebook. So it is my concern that we should keep Sweden neutral. Neutrality is your best. You have scaled down, and if you did what was correct, you have scaled down drastically. I will put it that way when Soviet Union disintegrated, because you saw in the scenario there is no more enemy. Russia is then no longer a threat, and it should have been from that time onwards, from that period onwards, NATO should have scaled down a lot instead and try and assimilate Russia as part of Europe.